Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Wibbity Bobbity Books. My name is Ellie and today I'm going to be filming 23 books for 2023. So I have created a list of 23 books that I really want to get to this year, and I've deliberately chosen books from my actual physical TBR because I have far too many books on my shelves that I haven't read yet. So I'm gonna really try this year to try and cut down my physical TBR and prioritize those books rather than getting super excited about all the new releases that are coming out, and rather than just running to the bookshop and buying more books, because I'm gonna end up buried in books at this stage. So yeah, I'm prioritizing these ones. Whether or not I'll actually read them all this year is to be seen. I like to mood read because I feel like then it doesn't feel so much of an obligation. It's more of just what I fancy at the time, and so I don't like to set myself strict TBRs. But that being said, I am excited for all of these titles, so I'm going to try and prioritize them. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to jump straight in with the first book because we've got quite a few titles to talk through. Right, so first up we have Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the third and final book in the Daevabad trilogy. I have read books 1 and 2, and I've actually started this third and final book, but I ended up soft DNFing it because I picked it up in the winter, and this is a fantasy that's set in the desert, so I just wasn't really vibing with the setting when I was reading this final book, so I decided to put it aside and leave it and save it for summer. So yeah, I'm very excited to get back into this one because it's such a fun fantasy series. The first book follows two main perspectives. We follow Nari, who's a con artist living on the streets of Cairo, and we follow Prince Ali, who lives in this magical city known as Daevabad. And the story basically takes off when Nari accidentally summons a Jinn warrior when she's doing this con act, and the two of them end up on the run being chased by these evil creatures known as the Sharfit, and they seek sanctuary within the magical city of Daevabad, and we learn a little bit more about the politics that's going on within that city. It's so much fun. I highly recommend if you like a fast-paced fantasy, and if you're looking for something with a slightly different setting to what you might normally see in fantasy books. Next we have The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. So this is the second book in his most recent fantasy series, and it's a adult fantasy series that's inspired by Norse mythology, which is right up my street. The first book takes place on Vigrid, which is a battle plane where the gods fell, and we follow three main perspectives. We follow Orca, who is a fierce mother character who will do anything to save her son. We've got Elvar, who is a female warrior who's trying to win her battle fame, and we also follow the perspective of Varg, who is a ex-slave who is out for vengeance. So it's got some really great characters in there and a really great world building as well. And yeah, I had quite a lot of fun with the first book, so I'm excited to continue on with the series. Next up we have Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. I've been meaning to pick this one up for ages. I read Strange the Dreamer last year. It was actually the first book that I picked up last year, and I loved it. It made it onto my top 10 books of 2022 because it was so fantastic, but for some reason I've just been putting off picking up the sequel to this duology, and I think it's because I liked the first book so much that I'm worried that I won't like the finale to this little duology. And yeah, I've just been putting it off for some reason, but I need to correct that and get to it this year. So yeah, if you haven't heard of this duology before, I think it's a young adult fantasy duology, and the first book follows our main character Laszlo Strange, who is an orphan of war, and he has always been fascinated with this city known as Weep, and this city has been cut off from the rest of the world and nobody can remember why. And then our main character gets presented with the opportunity to go and try and find this lost city and to solve the mystery of what happened to it, and we follow his journey from there, and it's so lyrically written and it's just so fantastic. So yes, I must get to the second book this year. Book number 4 is Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I haven't heard anyone saying anything negative about this series. Everybody seems to love this series, particularly the first book, and I am just really intrigued about the hype. Couldn't tell you what the book's about, if I'm being honest, but I've just heard that it's an amazing epic fantasy story and it's quite different to a lot of other fantasy stories. Yeah, I'm just really intrigued by this one. I want to know what the hype is. I'm deliberately not looking up the synopsis because I think I would prefer to go into this one knowing as little as possible. So yeah, I'm just very intrigued by that one. Continuing on with the epic fantasy, the next book that I want to read in 2023 is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in her Farseer trilogy, and I have been meaning to read Robin Hobb for so long, but have been slightly intimidated by how long her series are. She's got quite a few sets of trilogies and she's got a really expansive world, and a lot of people say that it's really emotional, and so yeah, I've been a little bit intimidated by it, but I'm very excited to give it a go finally this year. All I know about this first book is that we follow a royal bastard, I think, called Fitz, and that he gets trained up to become a royal assassin. Don't know any more than that, but I'm very, very excited to finally be trying Robin Hobb's work. Number 6 is The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker, another start to an epic fantasy series, but this one is a nautical fantasy series, and I love fantasy stories that are set on the ocean, so I'm very, very excited for this one. Again, I don't know a huge amount about it. All I know is that it takes place on a island community, I think, where the people who live on the islands build ships out of the bones of dragons, which just sounds so cool. Next up we have The Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. So this is a book that has been on my TBR for the longest time. It's another epic fantasy book that everybody seems to love. It's one of those classic fantasies that often makes it onto people's favourite ever fantasy series lists. So I'm very, very excited to finally give this one a try. All I know about this one is that we follow a band of thieves known as the Gentlemen Bastards, and that I think it has kind of piratey vibes. Number 8 is The First Binding by R.R. Verdi. This is the first book in a new South Asian inspired fantasy series that has been likened to The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is why it is on my TBR, because The Name of the Wind is one of my favourite adult fantasy books. So every time I see a comparison to that book, I have to give it a try because I really, really enjoy that style of writing and that style of presenting a fantasy story, because in The Name of the Wind we follow a character who is telling us his story. He's recounting his life story, I suppose, to a chronicler, and I think that's very much the same in this book. I think we have a character who has become a legendary figure and they are recounting their story, so I'm very excited for that one. Number 9 is Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. Again, this is one that has been on my radar for a really long time because it sounds like so much fun. All I know about this one is it's a comedic fantasy and we follow a band of has-been mercenaries that are coming together again for one last hurrah, for one last adventure, and it's supposed to be a little bit silly. It's supposed to be quite funny. We're following these characters who I think are now in their 40s, who are a little bit past it, but who are determined to come back together again for one last quest, and it just sounds like so much fun. It's also got references to classic rock, I think, classic rock music, and it also is apparently quite like Dungeons and Dragons the game, which is a game that I do enjoy playing, so I'm interested to see those kind of references within this book, and I'm very excited to pick up something a little bit more light-hearted and a little bit more silly. Next we have Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. This is a adult, I think, science fiction fantasy story. It's the first in a series, and all I know about this is that it's about lesbian necromancers in space. Need I say more? Moving on to number 11, we have a middle grade book. So this is Amari and the Great Game by B.B. Alston, the second in a middle grade series. I read the first book a couple of years ago, I think, when it first came out, and I really enjoyed it, so I'm very much looking forward to continuing on with this series. The first book has been likened to Men in Black and also to the series Nevermore, if you've read that series, and I think that's quite an accurate way to describe this book. So the first book follows a young girl called Amari who is trying to find out what happened to her brother who went missing, and she ends up finding this briefcase in his bedroom which contains an invitation for her eyes only, and it's to compete to gain a position in the Secret Bureau of Supernatural Affairs. So she decides to try out to become a member of this bureau, and she's entered into a series of trials, and she finds out that there is this whole secret world where, you know, all manner of mystical creatures, you know, fairies, wizards, I can't think of anything right now, but all of those kind of creatures from stories that we hear about do actually exist, but they're just in hiding from humanity, which is just such a fun idea. So yeah, really enjoyed the first book, and I'm very much looking forward to carrying on with the story. Next up we have Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. This is the third book in her Wayfarers series, which is a really hopeful science fiction series that I do really enjoy. I love the first two books and have been meaning to continue on with the series, so I'm going to make sure that it's a priority this year. If you haven't heard of this series before, it's a really wholesome type of sci-fi that I feel like is quite refreshing for the sci-fi genre, and the first book basically follows a crew of people who work on board this ship called the Wayfarer, which is a ship that creates tunnels through space, and the whole book is basically about the crew on board this ship and their dynamic and their different personalities, and we've got lots of different sort of alien races that cohabit on this ship, and it's just really fascinating finding out about all of their different cultures and their dynamics and their morals and everything. And it's, as I said, quite a hopeful sci-fi, but it also deals with some interesting themes including identity and romance and relationships, and it's just excellent. Continuing on with the sci-fi theme, my next book that I want to get to is Axiom's End by Lindsay Ellis. I put this on here because I've been meaning to get into some more science fiction, and I happen to have this one on my shelves, and it's been recommended to me by a family friend. So yeah, all I know about this book is that it's a science fiction about first contact. Number 14 is Godkiller by Hannah Kanner. This was on my anticipated releases of 2023 list, but I have already purchased it, so it is already on my physical TBR, which is why I'm including it on this list. This one sounds like so much fun. It says that we follow a slayer of gods and a disillusioned knight who join together to defeat a indestructible deity. Next up we have Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton. I mean, who doesn't love dinosaurs? This is such a classic that I haven't read yet, and I've heard so many people saying that it's really amazing and that it's even better than the movie, so I'm really intrigued. I'm also interested by the fact that people say that this book contains quite a lot of science talk, and I'm just really interested to see how that kind of fits into the story. So yeah, I'm very excited for that one. Number 16 is In an Absent Dream by Shannon Maguire. This is the fourth book in the Wayward Children series, which is a fantasy series that I really enjoy. I've read the first three books, I've loved most of them, particularly the first two, not so keen on the third one, but I'm really intrigued to carry on with the series. This is a portal fantasy, and each book is like a little novella, so they're quite short, and the premise is that there is this school for wayward children that has been created for kids who have stumbled across a portal to another world, and then for some reason they've ended up coming back to the real world, and all they want to do is to find a portal back to the fantasy world where they came from, because that's the only place where they ever felt accepted for who they are. And so this woman called Eleanor West created this school for all of these children to come and stay and wait for their portals or their doorways to open for them again. And yeah, each book follows a different fantasy world, because obviously it's a portal fantasy, and we follow a different main protagonist, and it's just really fantastic. I really enjoy the fact that it has such a whimsical feel, but also includes some really interesting discussion topics and also some darker themes as well. I love that juxtaposition. So yeah, very excited to carry on with that series. Next up we have Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I have been meaning to try classics for a while. I have read very few classics in my time. I just find them really intimidating, but I am quite interested to try more gothic classics because I think that's the little niche that I will particularly enjoy. So yeah, I do actually have a nice copy over here of The Picture of Dorian Gray, so I need to finally get round to reading that. All I know about it is that we follow our main character Dorian, who sells his soul to have this portrait created of him so that the portrait ages instead of him, so he can stay young and beautiful forever. Keeping on the creepy theme, the next book on my list is Slewfoot by Brom. I've been meaning to read some of Brom's work for a long time because I've heard nothing but fantastic things, and I think that his artwork is incredible, and I know that he includes some of his artworks in his books, and I've heard quite a few people saying that they enjoyed this one, so yeah, I'm quite intrigued by it. All I know is that it's a dark, witchy, folkloric tale, and I think it involves some kind of battle between Puritan and paganism, which sounds right up my street. Next up we have Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. This is a book that I saw gained quite a lot of hype last year. I feel like quite a lot of people read it and it seemed to do really well. Everybody seemed to be really enjoying it, so I was quite intrigued by the buzz that it got and want to give it a go for myself, especially because I'm trying to read more translated fiction. So yeah, I'm really intrigued by this one. All I know is that we follow several children who end up finding this magical portal to a magical world, which gives them a little bit of respite from their daily life and their daily struggles. That's all I really know. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the list now. Number 20 is Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is such a booktube darling. Everybody seems to love this story and everyone says that it's really amazing and really beautiful, and I just haven't read it yet. I bought a beautiful edition of it because I thought that I was gonna love it, but I just feel a little bit intimidated. I think because it's had so much hype that I'm just really worried I'm not gonna love it as much as everyone else does. But if you've not heard of this story before, this is a retelling of the story of Achilles, but it's told from the perspective of Patroclus, who is Achilles' best friend, and there's a big emphasis on the relationship between those two characters. For number 21 we have The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul by Douglas Adams. So the reason why this one's on the list is because I've been wanting to read more from this author ever since reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I really enjoyed that sci-fi series. And when I recently went home to visit my family, my mum lent me this book and she recommended it and said that she really enjoyed it. So yeah, I'm very excited to give this one a try. Couldn't tell you what it's about other than the fact that it's a sci-fi, and I'm expecting it to be humorous, I'm expecting it to be a little bit silly and all of those fun things that The Hitchhiker's Guide was. I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice now, but we're nearly at the end. Number 22 is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. So I have been trying to work my way through Neil Gaiman's backlist because I really enjoy his writing, and this one is next up on the list. I don't know a huge amount about this one other than it's a standalone fantasy, and I think we follow a man called Richard who ends up stumbling across a alternate London. So I think it's called Below London or London Below. So it's like an alternate version of our London, which sounds really fun. And finally, book number 23 is Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. This is a gothic horror retelling of the Juniper Tree fairy tale. So yeah, I'm super excited for this one. If you know me at all, you'll know that I am a sucker for a fairy tale retelling, especially if it's a horror retelling or if it's something gothic and twisted. And from what I've heard of this story, apparently it's really dark and really unsettling, and that just really intrigues me. So I'm very excited to give that one a go, probably in the spooky season. And yeah, that's the end of this list. That is 23 books that I would love to get to in 2023. I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please let me know what books you're planning to pick up this year. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!